Hello. Hey. Yes. All right. Yes. Yeah, wow. Yeah. Hey, yeah. Thank you.
Was blind, but now I see.
That's right.
Yeah.
Lost, but now I'm found.
We're talking about health here, of course. And because this is our health forum, Jon has been part of our family for 5 or 6 years. Came before he made Stephen Colbert famous. He was working here. But I thought I'd start with a health question, which is you've done a lot with health on Lift the Spirits and shown how music affects health.
Well, I think that for me, my approach to looking at music and how it affects health is through spirituality and also through the idea of mental health in the sense that with music, when I'm playing, to me, that's a form of meditation. I'm letting my mind wander in service of the audience. I'm trying to create something that, through it resonating within my core and coming through this instrument, it reaches the people and resonates within their core. And the mind controls everything. That controls how we feel, how we think, is how we become an artist or how we become a doctor or an actor or a comedian. Comes from the mind first.
You begin every day meditating, right?
That's what I got to get calibrated. You got to calibrate yourself for what's ahead, because a lot of things try to knock that off balance. And if you knock that off balance, you can't get to the heart of the matter. And to me, that is what being unhealthy is really all about. Of course, you can't eat junk food all the time, but it's about being balanced and really being in control of yourself.
And you say you're connected with the spiritual. You also do prayers every morning, right?
Well, for me, that is the number one thing that keeps me balanced. In a world where, I mean, there's a lot going on in these times. And I think when you think about spirituality, it gives you context and meaning, fortitude within the chaos. Mm-hmm. When you have fortitude within the chaos, you can create, which is what I do for a living. And you can also give and love better, because you're not worried about what's next. Whatever comes next, it's going to be all right.
And so you have songs like Believe in Love, I think is one you did recently. And that seems to come out of that feeling.
Well, yeah, love is the greatest form of service, because love isn't something that gives and asks in return. True love is when you give of yourself, of your soul, from the depths of your soul, and whatever happens, happens. And to be okay with that, you have to be in a certain place as a human being. Doesn't matter how much money you have or where you're from or what you've done in life. You got to be in a place where you can say, I'm going to give because I want to show love. I choose love. And whatever else happens, let the chips fall where they may.
You want to do a little Believe in Love?
Oh, my goodness. Let me get into it.
We have not rehearsed this, so I don't know what he wants to play. You play something else.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll get into it. Here's a story. On such an early morning, we were yawning. Yeah, we were tired and hungry, and people staring. They said that we wouldn't make it instead of sharing. They came along to take it, but we started singing. And then the ground started shaking, so fascinating. How many people waiting? And when you're feeling lonely and you're down and out, just play this song, just play this song. Oh, oh. Everybody sing along with me right there. Oh, oh, there. We were standing with our backs against the wall, and now we're standing hand in hand. We've got it all, and all I know is that we must believe in love. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Bravo.
Yeah.
You actually, in the connection of the music to health, you actually won a big award from Mount Sinai Hospital. I think Ken Davis is here.
Oh,
and you
wow.
do a program with Mount Sinai to try to study the connection of music. Tell us about how that works.
Well, if you think about music therapy as a recognized profession, as a legitimate profession, it started in World War II when there were soldiers who were wounded and they found that music actually helped them to heal. And they started to try to make the connections to try to figure out what caused that. Why is this working in this way? So fast forward to today, at Mount Sinai, the Louis Armstrong Center for Music and Medicine is at the forefront of this movement of music therapy and healing. You know, we do things with children who have asthma, and we give them harmonica boards.
Show them what
And
a
we figure out-
harmonica is.
Oh, for those of you who don't know, I play this instrument as well.
What does Winton call it?
A harmonica board, it's a harmonica and a keyboard put together. Some people call it a melody horn, some people call it a melodica, but it sounds like this.
So you do that with the kids, right?
Yeah.
So you do that with the kids, and
Yeah, the kids, and it helps them to understand breathing and rhythm, and also there are things that you can do to learn how to better calibrate yourself in terms of your pulse, in terms of your breath, and that helps to slow your mind down. So we've worked with children that have ADD as well. And finding time to do that is something that I've really wanted to do and figure out how to study it. I mean, I don't have time to go to medical school, but I figured that music therapy would be a way for me to get into it. So Joan Lowry, who runs the division there, she invited me over one day and she taught me a few different techniques. Oh, that is. She taught me a few different techniques that I wanted to try out with the people
Like
here
what?
today. Well, a way to meditate through music to slow your mind down, slow your pulse down, and to put yourself in a headspace where you can go outside, face the day, kind of like what I do in the morning.
do you think you could teach some of
Yeah,
okay.
I hope so.
our patrons?
Y'all ready? Well, okay. So I want everybody to close your eyes. Now, as I start to play, I want you to envision the most peaceful place that you have ever been. And if you've never been there before, create it in your mind. It doesn't even matter if it's not real. Now that you're there, envision those who you care about most in your life right now. They are with you in this happy place. You're doing maybe what is your favorite activity to do together. Maybe it's skiing, maybe it's sitting in the middle of a creek, fishing, the waters are still. Whatever it is, firmly imprint that in your mind right now. Now imagine you're floating and as I play in the higher register of the instrument, you're going higher into the air. And as I come down, you're coming back to the ground. Kind of like a very pleasant gondola ride of sorts. Now imagine you're floating and you just keep going up. And you're just going up and up. You're into the clouds, everything disappears. Thank you.
You may have transformed Aspen forever. Thank you.
Goodness.
I was fascinated by how you used a very high register there. What do you use the very low register for in this?
Grounded. Being grounded. You hear this sound, and a lot of composers have utilized this. If you think about the great John Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, he would always play fifths to ground the rhythm section because the emotion that they created in that quartet with Alvin Jones on drums and Jimmy Garrison on bass was almost like a tornado. There's a lot of angst. It was the most violent sounding jazz expression to date. And when you hear McCoy in the midst of all of this chaos going, settles it. So that kind of motion is that kind of motion in music is very effective if you come back to something solid. Tension, release. So I use the low register to ground things a lot of the time. And the high register is not necessarily a place to create tension, but it's more of a place to create an ethereal atmosphere in the music. You know, the high register, the instrument sounds like bells. That, to me, is a meditation. If you just play a note on the piano, you could actually meditate. If you don't know how to play the piano, you can sit at the piano, play the note, and try to listen to all of the sonorities within that one pitch and listen to that pitch until it dies out completely. And that takes you to a place. These are all devices that we use in music. It's not the notes on the page. This is something deeper within our anatomy that you can explore. Other things are added. Yeah. Other things, if you listen to the pitch, there are more overtones that are added as time goes on. Now, what happens when you do it in the low end of the piano is you hear the full overtone series.
With your pedal on, you mean?
With the pedal on.
Yeah.
When you press the pedal and you hit the lowest A on the piano, what we call the overtone series happens, which is the lowest note of the instrument here, and ringing in that pitch, you'll hear every other note that there is in the universe. People call the overtone series the universal anatomy of music. In any form of music, in any style, when you hear the overtone series, that's kind of the organizing factor for music, which box well-tempered clavier is made from, and so on, everything in American music. So see if we can hear it
Yeah. Now, when you were taking me to the place that I was supposed to visualize, it was with Kathy and Betsy on Royal Street.
Oh,
And I'm hearing the Treme Jazz Band with your late Uncle Earl Batiste leading it, coming up the street. But they're using the low register for something else. They're using it almost to set the beat, right?
well, in New Orleans, the music, the low register is often taken by the bass drum, which that's creating rhythm, and the tuba is the foundational element that's doing the pop, boom, 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 boom. And if you put the bass drum with that, that's what the funk is.
So you have a 2/4 time because it's a march.
It's 2/4.
And then on the last four for the...
Yeah, and beat 4 is accented, which creates funk. So if you go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and if you play all of these straight, that's happening. That's cool. But then if you go to beat 4, 1, 2, 3, make you want to get up, out, get up, out. See? And then when you put the bass drum with that at the bottom, you see the bass drum player though? That's the funk, you know. So like, you know what I'm saying?
You know, he started at age 6 with the Batiste Brothers Band, right?
Oh, my
And they
goodness.
just said, go play. And so you found the drum, so that's where you learned that, right?
Drums is a very instrument. It's an easy instrument to have a child just take and go play with. I started, you know, playing the drums, and you know, there's something about playing an instrument that I think helps you to really find yourself, your core. I mean, I recommend that anybody who doesn't play an instrument, you don't have to be good. Just pick up an instrument and play it. That's a lesson that I learned when I was a kid, because something about that form of expression helps you to find that balance that we're talking about. That kind of searching and listening that is involved with playing an instrument helps you to really discover things about yourself that I don't know if there's any other field or endeavor that can get you to that place. And the personal expression that I found playing the drums was liberating for me. And a big part of finding that balance for me was finding out that, you know, I can do anything I want in this space. In music, there are no rules. There are rules that people put after the fact. But in its truest form, like a child with a drum, nobody's telling you what to play. You're just getting up there and you create. And if you can take that into other areas of your life, I think you live a healthier life. The idea that you can just get up and create. You know a lot of things, you've studied a lot of things, you've developed all these things, but you can look at something with a natural curiosity in the moment, and you may be able to see another side to it that you never thought was possible.
And when you do that, say at a Mount Sinai, and you have a program there, and you want to lift spirits. I know it's named after Louis Armstrong. I assume it's A Wonderful World is part of it, or
What a Wonderful World is the theme song.
It's either me or you.
You got your clarinet?
I got my clarinet, but you play. That's not a reed instrument, your harmonica, is it?
It's got reeds in the back here. This beautiful paint job. Shout out to Jess Freet. It's got reeds back here, but it's only activated through wind. So
Oh, I see.
no sound.
So you're not a reed man.
Nah, not so much.
It's a wonderful world.
It's a wonderful world. Let me get a little
Or
sip.
Sunny Side of the Street, or medley.
Oh my goodness.
Well, these are the songs you
All
must use
unrehearsed.
at the hospital, right?
Yet I've played this song in the nursing home, and I played this song in different parts of the hospital. And what I find is there's always happiness associated with tears of joy. It's kind of like, even for people who don't know the song, something about the lyric and the melody create a sense of nostalgia. And there's something about that that is powerful. It's cathartic to cry, but be happy at the same time.
Wait, explain the nostalgia and why that's a part of it.
Well, music oftentimes triggers our memory to things. Like if you're going through, say you're going through a bad breakup or something, or you have a record that your father would play to wake you up in the morning to go to school, or things like that. Music has a way of seeping into our psyche that way and staying there. And whenever we hear that music, no matter where we are in our life, it brings back that moment. And it doesn't always bring it back in positive ways, but that's what makes a song like Wonderful World such a powerful song, because it seems like it's embedded with so much joy. It's just something about it, but it's also a very melancholy song. If you listen to the lyrics, it's actually about death. Mm-hmm. It's about the passing of time and the circle of life, mm-hmm. and how it's like, you know, we're here now, but tomorrow somebody else will be here, and, you know, they'll know more than I'll ever know, but mm-hmm. this is where we're at, this wonderful world we're in, mm-hmm. you know?
Sounds good. I'm ready. I'm not good.
My goodness, I'm working.
Well?
No, it's good. I love it. I see trees of green and red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed days, dark, sacred nights. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. the colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, and also all the faces of all the people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, and I watch them grow. They'll know much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. What a wonderful world. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. Thank you.
When Louis sang that song, was he happy or melancholy?
Louis had a sense of irony in his presentation. For instance, a lot of songs that he would sing had a melancholy lyric, but with a jubilant musical accompaniment. If you think about Wonderful World, or if you think about, even more appropriately, I think Mac the Knife, which is a song about a serial killer. He would sing songs that had very dark subject matter, but his vibration was the complete opposite to that. So I think that he uplifted a lot of people, but there was a depth there that I think actually made it more uplifting. It's almost like when you put a little bit of salt into something sweet, and it kind of makes it sweeter. It's that, there's something to that. It's hard to really put it into words, but there's something to the irony of it. And I think Louis Armstrong exemplified that at a supreme level.
He was always wearing a mask, it seems.
Oh, yeah. A smiling mask.
But it was a mask.
It was a mask, for sure. Mm-hmm. Well, Louis Armstrong became one of the ambassadors for the music because of how he played, but also how people related to him. When they saw him, it was kind of like, that's the happiest guy in the world. Yeah. I want to be around that guy. And then when you're around him and you hear the music, it takes you through the range of emotions. So then you leave feeling more human. And if you can do that with music, I think you kind of, it's almost like a form of medicine. It's healing, it's therapeutic. And I think that, there've been great musicians going back to biblical times where music has been something that, brings people out of a situation, whether it's something, supernatural or even something just mentally weighing them down. And Louis Armstrong, I think, for jazz, was our first kind of ambassador of both music, but also the healing properties of it in a way that can be seen through his person, even before you heard him play.
You're curating on starting July 8th, for anybody who's back in New York.
Oh, yeah.
A Louis Armstrong, I think in Corona, Queens, his last home. He died in Queens.
That's right.
Tell me about the thing you're curating.
Well, a big part of what my music is all about that is akin to what Louis Armstrong was all about, is bringing music into communities to heal communities, and bringing people who don't have access to music or who would not experience what we do if, maybe it's socioeconomic issues, or maybe it's some issue with them even not being exposed to it, for instance, So going to Queens, where Louis Armstrong is from, is a place that has Flushing Meadows Park, where the U.S. Open is held, and we're taking over the park, and 20,000 people can come for free to experience a full day of music. And the spirit of that day will be about bringing people together who would never have been there otherwise, and having a healthy form of self-expression. So we're going to have several different bands, and I'll be playing with all of the bands. I'll be working that day too.
Okay.
But if you go into a place that's forgotten, and Queens is not forgotten, but I've never been to a jazz festival in Queens, which is why I was, Louis Armstrong lived there. It just made sense to me.
Yeah. By the way, we should thank Jazz Aspen Snowmass too, because they're the ones who brought him here.
Absolutely.
And Jim Harwood. So thank you, Jazz Aspen.
Yeah, where's Jim? Is Jim here?
No, Jim's still here, but it was a great concert last night too, and so I hope you'll keep coming back. What made Louis Armstrong? He had Buddy Bolden, a great cornetist, and then followed by King Oliver, and then Louis Armstrong at the very beginning, 1900 to 1900.
Bunk Johnson.
And Bunk Johnson. Why was Louis different?
Well, you have to imagine that he came up in a time where great trumpet players were a norm. You talk about New Orleans being a city of great musicians. Well, trumpet, drums, and piano are, I'd say, the top three things that you see at, if you look at a list of New Orleans great musicians, those would be the top three instruments on that list. Jelly Roll Morton's a great piano player, Professor Longhair, James Booker. These are people that I've listened to. But then Louis Armstrong was around at, I guess you would consider that a golden era for music in New Orleans. It was around the birth of jazz, but also there was great opera happening.
And he liked to listen to
He liked to listen to opera. He grew up on a street where there was opera. He liked to listen to the marching bands that would come through New Orleans. There was always a great marching band. The era of John Philip Sousa, the great composer of marches. Ragtime.
He got his first trumpet, I think, as it was hawked by the marching bands from the Spanish-American War that just ended, and they were leaving their trumpets when they got back home.
Exactly, and I don't know how many trumpets you're gonna find in a juvenile detention center these days.
But he was in a juvenile detention center, which is why that comment was made, yeah.
Right. And you think about ragtime, also at that time, had developed into a form where you could really hear ragtime masterpieces being played coming out of bars, just walking up the street, juke joints in New Orleans. So if you think about what his environment
what about the spirituals coming from the plantations?
The spirituals in the church music is kind of like the dirt of all this. Like that's the dirt that everything has grown out of. Because you think about the tradition of spirituals as a coping mechanism, as a way for those in our country that were enslaved, that built this country to cope and to make it through that time. They sang songs of inspiration. They sang songs of relaxation. They sang songs to get their mind off that effed up situation. They sung songs that developed this thing that I'm trying to figure out what word to put on it. It's this ironic, uplifting, but extremely dark coexistence. But something so powerful in that.
Like St. James Infirmary as an example? Or?
St. James, Just a Closer Walk with Thee. I mean, there's hundreds of spirituals.
So Closer Walk or St. James, are they mainly spirituals or marches or dirges, or is it just a melange?
It became, around the time of Louis Armstrong, these things have coalesced to actually become one body of work. But at the time, spirituals and secular music, before that, and even up until that time, was separate. the only thing that really tied them together was the blues. And if you think about the blues in church music and the blues in secular music, when those things started to come together in New Orleans, that was, like I said, the dirt of what jazz kind of sprung out of. That's the fertilizer that allowed it to grow. But Just a Closer Walk with Thee is spiritual in nature, where St. James Infirmary is a song it's a folk song. It's a blues folk song. So the only similarity is the sound and the structure. A lot of the same chord progressions, a lot of the same rhythm, a lot of the same sonorities. But the subject matter is very different. The blues is about, philosophically, you think about the blues. The blues is my girl left me, the dog died. But tomorrow,
St. James, it's flipped the other way. The girl dies, and
But it's about overcoming and keeping going, keeping things going in a more earthly realm. Whereas the spirituals are about, this is only temporary. I'm living for the afterlife.
Which is why A Closer Walk then becomes a jubilant song when you play it after.
Yeah, well, no matter what's happening, none of this matters to me as much as what's to come. Whereas St. James Infirmary is like, everything is happening, but I'm gonna be all right. It's a subtle difference.
And neither of them are syncopated in the way jazz sometimes is. So how does that come about?
Louis Armstrong, if you listen to, Fletcher Henderson is one of the great big band composers and arrangers and band leaders in the early 1900s. And Louis Armstrong, a lot of people passed through his band, but when Louis Armstrong passed through his band, the sound of the rhythm changed. And then the sound of the rhythm of American music changed, because everybody heard that and was like, oh, this is kind of what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, I don't want to keep making you work. Can you show just a little of what that means?
Oh, yeah, I love doing that.
Okay.
Rhythm.
Yeah.
So you got a march that's happening. That's march. You've heard
So
marches
you're basically
before.
at 2/4 at the moment.
That's right. Then. Now Louis Armstrong would take that feel, this thing is happening, and take the melody on the top, and the bottom would be straight, but what he would do is syncopate it. You see? Yeah. Now,
and does that come at all from ragtime, or is he?
Well,
how does he get it so that the basic beat is simple, and then sort of rags the top
that was
beat?
circumstantial.
Okay.
Because at the time, there was a lot of different things associated with music involving class. And if you think about the Creoles, when they played, they were of the upper class for the most part, and they wanted to play music as it was on the page,
Right.
like the classical musicians play, because that is associated with a high society.
These are the gens de couleur, the free men of color who were Creole and looked very much down upon at least Buddy Bolden and probably Louis Armstrong,
Yes.
right? Because they were
Till they heard him play.
till they heard him play.
So there were some bands where half of the guys would be improvisers and the other half of the guys would be reading the sheet music, until everybody learned how to improvise together in that way.
Who was the greatest of the Creole jazz orchestra
Jelly
leaders?
Roll Morton.
And he played in Storyville. And piano player.
Well, yeah, Jelly Roll Morton had a thing that he called the Latin tinge, which is kind of like he put that rhythm in the Creole music. He just took it all. So I think when you think about creativity, and you think about, like I was saying about liberation and the idea of playing an instrument and figuring out a way to express yourself in your full being in whatever you do, I think that you find that when you look at everything in your environment and you say, well, they're playing this way, they're playing that way, why are they not playing together in these ways? And, I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn about our world. And if you look at politics, if you look at relationships, it's kind of like sometimes things don't work together, but sometimes they do, and nobody's tried it yet.
Yeah. You've invented, to some extent, your own genre of music that comes exactly out of what you just said. You call it social music.
That's right.
Explain how that developed and give us a sense of what it's like.
Wow. So I love experimenting with things to try to figure out what I cannot do. Because everybody knows what you can do. There's many examples in history of what can be done. That's great. We should strive for that. But I think a lot of times about the concept of resurrection and the idea of learning all these things, learning how to do all this stuff. You can play, you can write, you can sing, you can do all these things you've learned how to do. But in the moment, to be born again and see it through the eyes of someone who's never seen it before. But you never lose any of the things that you learn. You never lose the history. You have that. So for me, social music is my exploration of what jazz has become in the 21st century, mainly due to the rapid advances of technology. If you think about how connected we are now, more connected than we've ever been, with access to information at the touch of a button, it's incredible how we can actually, it changes the way we absorb music and think about music. And me, being someone who's born into this generation, but also gravitated to jazz, I have to think about how do I make a relevant artistic statement within the context of an environment that has never existed before with jazz music. It wasn't like this when Miles was playing. So we have to think about what is the art, what barriers do we want to break down, and how do we want to contribute to the culture for the future. So you have the past is the art, the barriers is the intention, that's the present. That's what are our objectives with this music. And then the culture is the future. It's the dialogue that we're going to have with those who are coming in the future who have yet to meet or we may never meet. But they're kindred spirits to us, and they're going to gravitate toward this art form because it's the only thing that they can find that really engages their curiosity. So for me, social music is my statement on, I guess you could say in short, Jazz 2.0, jazz in the 21st century. And the intention of social music, which is partially why I call it that, is to bring people together into the room who may never have come into the same space if it weren't for the musical experience. So more than anything, it's a social experiment rooted in jazz, but drawing from everything.
Can you show us a little? Or?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I like to play. Yeah, actually in the video, I like to play.
It was out on the street, and you did in the subway once, right?
Yeah. Well, the idea is bringing the music out into the community and finding different ways to reach the people who have never experienced this music. They're not jazz fans, they're not live music fans, but we've played in all kind of places. We played in the streets, played in the subways, played in deserts, we've played in abandoned warehouses.
Beirut, Lebanon.
Yeah, we've gone to the cancer centers, we've gone to juvenile detention centers, we've gone to prisons, we've gone all around the world. And the band is called Stay Human because I believe that all of these things that we're doing, this outreach is healing, and it's bringing communities together and bringing people together. And I think that there's a very spiritual intention behind it for me. There's an artistic component, but to me, music, as I said, has a very spiritual thing that balances us if we engage with it.
You mentioned a few times the spiritual component. You're a very strong practicing Christian. Every morning you pray. I know you go to church every Sunday in the afternoon. Tell me how that helped create social music.
Well, love. If you think about giving of yourself, using this instrument as a tool of service. I'm going out to communities, going to places, I'm playing, even when we're performing yesterday, we're performing for people. We go out into the crowd, we greet people, we hug them, we shake their hands. This is all about showing love. And if we show people love and that energy resonates in the world, I think only good can come of it. So those are a part of my core values, and it.
But do you think it's connected to the way spiritual and religious music was connected to the birth of jazz?
I believe that it was connected to the birth of jazz through that way, which is spiritual music has a certain intensity to it. But also I think that jazz is a form of music that comes from, it's a different type of spirituality. Jazz is a form of self-identification and injecting your identity. First, you have to define it. Then once you define it, you're injecting your identity through an inanimate object, an instrument, to the point that if 1,000 different great jazz piano players sat at this piano, you'd hear 1,000 different pianos, but it's the same one. And once you figure that out, I truly believe that that's a very deeply spiritual, soul-searching sort of quest that all the great jazz musicians have gone through. So in that way, I think spiritual music and jazz music are deeply related.
And Stay Human, there's an album of it. What is the quintessential song that people should hear, or maybe a few bars of it?
Oh, wow.
Well, on the Stay Human album.
I think on the Stay Human album, there's a few. There are Let God Lead speaks to the spiritual component. Express Yourself speaks to the more self-identifying, self-realization component that I was speaking about with the jazz musicians. I can play a few of them. I mean, it's hard to say what's quintessential because it's all my music, so I love it.
Wow.
You know? Yeah. That's
Amazing.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You know,
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh. Thank you.
Great. We'll wrap up by bringing you back home, which is when Kathy and I were down for the first weekend of Jazz Fest.
Oh, yeah,
Late
that's
at
right.
night at Preservation Hall, the old hall, you just showed up and played a gig. How much is it important to you to keep to your roots and then build on it to be back with the earliest jazz, but then create a new form of jazz as you just showed us now?
Well, that's it's really important to me because I have so many experiences that are kind of tethered to my upbringing in New Orleans and in Kenner, Louisiana, and I have to figure out a way to frame all of this, and that's one way that I can frame it by visiting the well every now and then.
Now, the well for you is you have 5 generations of your family. You're the 5th who've picked up musical instruments and played, right?
I've wanted at some point in time to do a family tree to figure out the connections between the Batiste of New Orleans, the different clans, and how all of us have gravitated towards this form of expression. But there's several great musicians, some distant relatives, others who were very instrumental to my musical
teachers
upbringing.
like Alvin.
Teachers, Alvin Batiste, one of the great educators, the late Alvin Batiste. You know, my father, if you think about the traditions that he's come from and all the different things that are, I guess, a part of the fabric of New Orleans music in a very integral way, and you always find a Batiste there in some form or fashion. So,
How many, in your 5th generation, how many cousins do you have
my
who
goodness.
play music?
There's about, if I would count, somewhere near 30. It's very scary. But you know, like that composition was from our the social music album, Stay Human album, and it's entitled San Spirito. And I wrote that song in Italy, and there's a square called San Spirito in Florence, in Firenze, and we would go there with the band, and we would do a processional we call a love riot. It's like a second line, and we would create this love energy just to kind of, again, put these healing vibrations out there. And we would go to San Spirito sometimes at midnight, you know, after the gig. And we would play that all night, and they would have a drum circle, and the guys would bring out drums, and the guy would bring out the guitar like Pete Seeger, and we'd be sitting in the square, and everybody would be coming around. And it would become this kind of like communal sing-along where everybody is just in the square, and there's so much vibration. So much about it comes together and creates this huge vibration, and that song, to me, is the musical manifestation of the kind of all the different vibrations. You had the
Spirito.
Latin experience,
And it even has the name Spirito for you.
exactly, which I think kind of encapsulates everything that we've been talking about, and really brings it to the perspective of how, you know, that's how I try to channel all of the New Orleans influence, the influence of my spirituality, the influence of how I remain balanced. I just try to channel it through the music in a way that heals other people, no matter what else what they believe, wherever they're coming from. You know, those moments are why I play.
Well, I'm going to let you lead us in a love riot when we end in a minute.
Snap.
And you can move people out.
Yeah.
But I do want one more thing, if I may,
Yeah.
before that. And by the way, if you ever want to hear a truly great, the genius of jazz, it was 2 or 3 years ago when you
Oh,
and
yes.
Wynton Marsalis did it
Yes,
together
here.
on this stage, this very stage. And it was on YouTube. I saw it. So go to YouTube and Genius of Jazz, Batiste, Marsala, or whatever, and Aspen, and you'll see a beautiful hour that marches us through the history of jazz, which
Yes,
is
that
great.
was fun.
But the one thing I wouldn't mind you doing, since we are going into July 4th, and you did it at the very first thing you did when you first came to Aspen,
Right.
because it was July 4th,
Yes.
is
Yes.
you had a new arrangement of the national anthem.
Oh, yeah, I love that. Star Spangled.
I'll let you go, and then you can do a love riot afterwards.
Y'all ready, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you.